Okay, well, yesterday we had a chance to get started talking about the defense. Today we'll talk about the offense moving into spring ball. It's an exciting time. I know our offensive staff is anxious to get back on the field, and I know our kids are anxious to get back on the field. I thought we ramped things up towards the end of the season offensively. We found a little bit about who we were, and I know our kids are anxious to get on the field because our offensive coaches have really slimmed things down and put a package together that I think I'm excited to watch, and I think you guys will be excited to see as well. We want to be continue to be an up-tempo team, continue to push the ball down the field as quickly as possible, but also open things up a little bit. And you'll get a chance to talk to George and the offensive staff about some of those characteristics moving forward. But before we go there, I would like to give you an injury update for the offensive side of the ball. Mitch Kimball, quarterback, we're excited to see. He's got a little lower back problem that we're trying to work out, so he'll probably be limited at the beginning of spring, and then we'll see how he works forward. Nick Robinson had a little foot injury, so we're gonna hold tight with him, let him get healed up. He's in a boot right now. And then Keenan Hale and Adrian Fleming, both wide receivers, will be back full go as we hit this spring. With that, any questions starting off? Dave.
Yeah, Scott, I see that Rob's playing center this spring. I know you did that with Bart his senior year, your first year here. So there is a little precedent there. But in this case, you know, Jason's kind of been groomed for that spot. What was the thinking behind that?
Rob actually was ready to play center last year if we needed. Coach McDonald worked him in at center throughout the course of practice, especially mid-season. You know, Mackey took so many snaps for us. It got to the point where we were like, you know, I don't know if Jason's ready to go. Rob's comfortable doing it, and we made the decision as a staff to start spring ball out that way, and I know Rob's excited about it, and I know Jason will be, you know, excited to compete.
And Rob, I think he came in as a center, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, when we looked at him, he was an interior lineman that could snap, and, you know, you look at the guard and the center positions, and, you know, even now when we go into recruiting, you're always asking if those guys can play both sides and then in the middle at center, so that's what Rob was.
Scott, obviously you kind of went outside the Division I ranks to fill the two open coaching vacancies. What was the thinking there, and what has you confident that these guys can do the job?
They're the two best guys on the market, in my opinion. I think when you put a staff together, no different than when you're putting together your personnel for a team, it's important that you get people of like value systems that fit. And I felt both Joe Adam and Bobby Acosta fit. Joe Adam and I have known each other for many years. I always joke with Joe saying he was the most underrated coach in the country, and I meant it. And as soon as I could, I would, you know, try to hire him, he and his wife Lisa. And it's just great addition to the staff, as well as Bobby Acosta and his wife Alicia. There's also something to be hired for me. There's also something to hiring guys that have been head coaches, especially head coaches at places where you do everything. I think the appreciation factor for the game and the love of the game and the passion to coach football when you're coaching at a school that's similar to where I played, where you saw the coaches lining the fields and throwing grass seed down and on a watering schedule together. There's something about the passion that those guys have that is near and dear to my heart, as well as the fact that these two guys are extremely capable of doing the job for Coach McDonald.
Maybe we just hear about it now, you know, the success of a guy like Gus Malzahn who came from high school to successfully coach in college. Has that made it easier for you to make that
Never really considered it. You know, you make your own decisions for yourself, especially when you're an assistant coach for 20 years. And and every off season and every vacation I went on, you lay there and you're soaking up the sun and you're thinking about, if I'm ever a head coach, what would I do? So for years and years and years, I've played this out in my mind. And I always felt like everything was overrated in this business, other than people that had similar core values, that cared about the kids first and loved the game and were passionate about what they do. So I always felt like if we could find capable people that had the same passion with like values, then I'd make the right decisions in you know, recruiting and trying to, you know, get the right staff together. And I'm extremely confident that's what we did. But my dad used to always say to me, I'll never forget a phone call when I was coaching at Rhode Island. I was 26 years old. My father called to check and see how we were doing. It was my first full-time job. And I went on to tell him basically how we created a new defense, and basically we invented defensive football, is probably what it sounded like from my dad's point of view. And he stopped me at the end and he said, well, that's great. Sounds like you figured out some things that have been done for 40 and 50 years. Put it at me a little bit. And then he said, by the way, don't ever forget, there's probably a high school coach within 15 minutes of where you are right now that knows more football and has forgotten more football than you know. I love you. Tell Missy we said hello, goodbye. I hung up and I said, point well taken. And I think that's the way I look at things now.
Coach Acosta specifically
Yeah.
has a lot of ties in New Jersey.
Yeah, he sure does.
Was there a plan in place when you first took the job that you wanted to infiltrate that state more going forward?
Yes and no. First and foremost, I always hire coaches that coach first. I've never been one that felt like you go out and hire coaches that are recruiters first and then teach them how to coach. I don't know if I have it right or wrong, but I like good football coaches first. I feel like if you have good coaches, and if you put them in the right area, they could recruit any area. But with that being said, I was always looking outside the box to see who fit, especially in the East. And I didn't have a strong list of people that I knew when I first took the job here, and when we had the mass exodus of coaches going up north for a couple hours. So I went with the guys that were available that I knew would die to coach at Syracuse. That's how we started it. And with that being said, not a lot of those guys, as you well know, were Eastern rooted. So when these positions came open, my thought process was, who's the best young coach that can help us recruit New Jersey? And Bobby fit the mold, especially after we brought him in and talked to him. And Coach McDonald had already been talking to him about football, just talking X's and O's. So we had a familiarity with who he was. And along those conversations, all of a sudden you're talking about recruiting, you're talking about the type of kid that fits into Syracuse, and why Syracuse hasn't done a good job getting back into an area where we used to dominate. Back when Paul was here and Coach Mack, I mean, we dominated, and we'd like to get back to that. It'll take a lot of time, but I think we got the right people in place, and we're going to attack it hard.
Scott, George has mentioned, cranking up the offense to go full bore. Does that entail opening the playbook? Is that tempo? Is that a little bit of everything? And how can you kind of make that step in spring?
I think it's all inclusive. I think it does start with personnel, and I think that's reflected in the way we went out and recruited our offensive personnel this past year. Felt like we needed some big receivers that could go up and make plays when they were covered, and that's what I think our offensive and defensive staff went out and did in the recruiting process. So I think it starts with personnel. Philosophy is a starting point, and then you have to say, do we have the people to do it? And, you learn every game, every practice you're in, and that's what we did this past season. And now I think we're to the point where we're bringing people in, and now we can continue to bring people in that fit the mold. And I think it starts with personnel. But I do think it's all inclusive. We want to go fast enough that, we're keeping the defense off balance. All the controversial things that have been brought up, the past month with the rule changes or not changing the rules. I mean, it's self-fulfilling prophecy. You ask an offensive coach that loves the up-tempo offense, you're ruining football in his perspective. You ask a defensive coach, and he's going to say you're ruining football. The truth's always somewhere in between. And, that's why I was reluctant to really, put my hand on the table and pound it one way or the other, Tell us what the rules are, and we'll play by them. I like the up-tempo because it was difficult to defend in all my years as a coach. And I think we have the people that can do it and the coaches that are putting it into place.
Andrew? Terrell really stepped in middle of the season after the whole first few games of the year and really performed well, especially in the bowl game. What are you looking for next season as a head coach for him to do and continue on that development path?
Yeah, increased production, increases decision-making, and continue to be who he is and never change who he is, because who he is hard to find. He's a special kid. He is a strong young man, and I love his leadership capabilities, and I'd like to see those move up a little bit. That position carries leadership with its title, I think for Terrell, it does come natural, but we didn't want to put too much on his plate. I mean, he was fighting to just play, you know, between he and Drew early. It's hard to be a leader when you're not the starter. That's the truth. But I was pleased, not only the way he played, but also how he started to take charge of the offense and, you know, a sense of leadership that comes natural to him. And I look forward to seeing that amp up. But really the decision-making and continue to be a consistent leader.
Thanks, Coach Shafer. We'll
Dave?
Coach McDonald.
Let me finish. Dave, I think Dave had.
Well, I was just gonna follow up
It's
with
okay.
what Brian asked you, and that is in the playbook, and that is, you know, last year, I think you had a plan as to what you wanted to do, but you also you knew what the reality was, that you were strong at the running back position, you were gonna be inexperienced at the quarterback position, and maybe that dictates what you do a little bit, especially early in the season. Now that you have young receivers with some experience and Hunt with almost a year of start, does that now give you more options?
I'm hoping it does. We'll see how spring ball goes and how early fall camp goes. That's the truth right there. The biggest part of the plan that's probably the most essential is the ability to adjust to the elements as they come at us. You know, whether it be injury, whether it be you project a guy to be a great player and then he disappoints, or you don't expect someone to play well and he steps up. So I think you always adjust to the elements. You put your philosophy on paper, you work at it, and then you say this is what we can do and this is what we don't do well, and accentuate the positives. And like I always say, whisper the weaknesses, but continue to work on them hard. And that'll be our approach as we move forward, both sides of the ball.